Hello, everybody. We have the waiting room is filtering in right now, so we're going to wait just a minute here to get started until we get everybody in the waiting room in. And I know we'll have some others joining us as we go. So hang on for 30 seconds or a minute here. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here, even though I know we'll have a few more folks joining us. So I'm Dave Carter, along with my partner, Chris Roper. We're the regional directors for Flower Hill Institute. And we're really excited about the three folks that are joining us here today. In fact, we were just joking here. We all got on a bit early, and Chris and I decided we could just sign off and let Hannah and Nicole and Marvin carry the discussion. So I think this is going to be real helpful. If you were with us in December, we did have a webinar or a roundtable on mental health. And we got so much feedback from that of people saying we need more information that we decided to schedule a second one. And we're really happy with the folks that we have here today. Before we introduce them, I just wanted to do a couple of housekeeping notes. This is being recorded. It will be archived on our website. So if you know of somebody that couldn't join us today, they can certainly download this at their convenience and watch it. We'll be putting up a list of resources at the end here, and we will also have that document attached to the recording of the webinar so people can link onto those resources. Following this, you will also get a 2-question survey. Very simple. What feedback can you give us on this session? And what are some ideas that you'd like to have us cover in future roundtables? Chris and I have been doing these about once a month. We've got so many topics in here, we may be doing them about twice a month. And I'll talk about the ones we have coming up here at the end of this roundtable. So with that, let's see, Chris, did I forget anything on the housekeeping side here?
No, no, you're good. And just everyone know we read your comments, and we definitely love getting your suggestions for discussion ideas. We're taking those to heart, and Dave and I study on those every week to figure out when we can slip in new topics. So please keep those coming into us as you keep tuning in. So thank you, and I know we have a great group of folks on here today, so I'll shut up and let them talk, and look forward to it.
Great. So Marvin, said you're the returning veteran here in two more ways than one. Go ahead and introduce yourself to folks.
Absolutely, Dave and Chris. Thank you once again for having us back here. My name is Marvin Frank from Briarwood Cattle Farm. We're located here in Red Springs, North Carolina. We're a cow-calf operation. We raise beef, chicken, and pork. And now we're in the process now of segueing into a new fresh meat butcher shop here located on our farm called Briarwood Custom Meats Butcher Shop. And we'd love for you to visit us at www.briarwoodcattlefarm.com.
Great. Thanks, Marvin. And I happened to be up in Maine in January for a statewide trade show, and I had the pleasure of meeting Nicole and visiting Southpaw Packing and visiting and meeting Hannah as well. So Nicole, go ahead and introduce yourself.
I am Nicole Sargent. I'm the owner of Southpaw Packing Company. We DBA as Wyndham Butcher Shop, which is a slaughter and processing facility in Wyndham, Maine. And then we also DBA as Southpaw Meat Market, which is a retail facility in Raymond, Maine.
Great. And you headed up the Slicing Through the Stigma, or heading up the Slicing Through
Yes.
the Stigma campaign, which we'll talk about here in a minute. So, but go ahead, Hannah.
Hi there, my name's Hannah Longley. I am the Director of Advocacy and Crisis Intervention with NAMI Maine. And I have had the pleasure for 4 or 5 years to work with Nikki on the Slicing Through Stigma campaign and all of the work that she's doing here in Maine. I joke that I get to be a professional cheerleader, just cheer Nikki on and all the great stuff that she's doing.
So great, thank you. So Nicole, when we were talking the other day, you started off by talking about, your journey and the lack of resources you felt and how that led you to kind of founding the Slicing Through the Stigma a little bit. So share that with folks.
Okay. So when we took over the slaughterhouse and the processing plant, I think it's important for people to know that I came to this with 30 years of health and human service experience. So I had a little bit different background, plus I had an ag background. And people came to us and people felt very comfortable sharing their stories with me. And it became very clear that farmers were experiencing a lack of health care. They needed help with mental health, substance abuse, and they were sharing those stories with me. And this was kind of pre-pandemic when I reached out to Hannah and said, look, we need some help. We had business folks coming that were stressed out. They didn't have an avenue to figure out how to handle their stress. And so we reached out to Hannah and said, look, I need something. So we put together a wellness campaign. We put it on our website. And that was pre-Slicing Through the Stigma. And so we offered up a website for wellness and health for our employees and for farmers and for anyone in the public that wanted to access that. And that's kind of how we started that piece of it. Slicing Through the Stigma came along a little bit later.
From your experience, I know being in the meat processing business is stressful even under the best of circumstances. What are some of the things that you found? You're in the meat processing business, you're up in the middle of the depths of winter where you've got an ice storm coming in and you've got a husband recovering from surgery and all of the things that people face. So, what are some of the things that you've noticed through your path?
Well, I know Hannah can talk more on the statistics that we definitely see here in Maine, and talk about what we see a lot. What we were seeing, especially here in Maine, is the lack of services. There aren't a lot of processors here in Maine. So the demand on our services are very high. There are people knocking down your door. They don't care that they call you at 4 o'clock in the morning. They don't care if they send you a text at midnight. The farmers need processing. There is lack of skilled labor. So that means the people that are working very hard. They're working themselves pretty much to death. There is substance abuse that happens within our industry. And there is just the funding, money, the stressors of that. And obviously you were talking about seasonal. Here in Maine, I just had a conversation with a woman yesterday that she said the lack of sunlight was really bothering her and the fact that she couldn't get outside. So there's a combination of things, and Hannah can touch base more on some of the statistics that we're seeing here in Maine.
Great.
Hannah.
Before I throw it over to Hannah, one
Okay.
of the things I failed to mention as we started here is if you have questions that you want answered, please type them into the chat or into the Q&A there. Chris and I watch that as we go along, and we'll feed those to folks. Even though you're not on camera, on mic, please give us your questions so that our folks can answer it. So yeah, Hannah, talk a little bit about some of the statistics that you're familiar with. Yeah.
So I will say that we do a lot of work not only with the agricultural industry, but we also have a wonderful partnership with the Maine Fishermen's Association. And so because of that, we're able to have a lot of collaborative partnerships that, although they're different, they're very similar. And so what's been lovely is that we've been able to pull a lot of the agricultural statistics, but also a lot of the OSHA statistics, and then be able to support both of those initiatives and bring in together the two groups, because what we see here in the state of Maine and across nationally, what we know for the statistics is that there are certain risk factors, and some of it is being male, being in highly physical professions, and being in being middle to older in age. I always hate middle age. It always seems so far away now, but I think some of us, when we hit it, we're like, oh, it's really not that old. But again, we know that the body starts to slow down. There's something that the fishermen have adopted in their work, which is the graying of the fleet. And we very much see that in the agricultural industry as well. And the fact that there is a very, at least here in Maine, oftentimes a very big divide in certain professions. And so what we see is that as the body ages and it starts to break down, a lot of people who are in professions that identify very closely with their role in life for various, under various circumstances, the risk factor for suicidality, for substance use, for depression, drastically increases. And honestly, here in the state of Maine, a lot of those professions are all interconnected in the fact that it's the logging industry, it's the agricultural industry, it's the fishing industry, it's in truck driving, and then also in contracting and construction work. And so again, we look at the largest professions, how they all connect and intersect. As we have a lot of folks who are in certain industries, when it is seasonal and they need additional work, they'll go to some of the other industries to gain that employment and the financial need that is there. And so we see it all ends up connecting. And so that's where a lot of our work and our research really comes from.
Dave, the other
So
piece
Marvin-
that goes with that is
Yep.
that we have PFAS that is happening here in the state of Maine, and that has been affecting a lot of our farmers physically, mentally, and financially.
Yeah. It's a multi-layered, yeah. I think thank you, Nikki. I think that has been significantly, and that is coming across many, many different systems. Our systems we're supporting from the agricultural workers, the farmers, hunters are definitely, it's in so many different aspects and layers of it. I will say here in the state of Maine, we first started noticing our first trends in suicide deaths when I always do it as a stumping of people, but we started noticing our first trends when we put in the highway north of Augusta, which if you've ever been to Maine, it's our capital. It's a lovely city. I'm here right now. But what we started to see is that the government came in and took farms by eminent domain. And we have a proud tradition of generational farms, generational land. It is really wrapped up in the identity. And actually here in the state of Maine, again, when we first started noticing trends in suicidality, it was farmers who lost their generational farms, lost their land by that eminent domain. And we are seeing now, not, I think, with the same risk factors of it, but with death, like the suicide death rate, but we are definitely seeing the same mental health impacts and trauma impacts of it, as again, people are losing their generational farms. And now we're out, some of these farms are a couple 100 years old in families, and they're losing them.
That's something, I noted, I went through the farm crisis in the 1980s, and, you have the stigma that you have of, gosh, great grandpa founded this and grandpa took it over and dad did it successfully. I'm a failure because of that. And there's so many external factors. So that's really important. Marvin, I noticed Hannah talked about some of the factors of particularly, of a male in a physical job who's maybe middle to older. Maybe throw in being a veteran on top of that. What are some of the issues there? Yeah.
Yeah, denial is one of the main ones in dealing with pride a whole lot. Being in denial of, knowing that you need help and then asking for help helps create that layer of stress or dealing with that mental health issue. And then that pride getting right in the way, I don't need any help when I can do it by myself. Knowing that our hands and our bodies hurt, but just to get that, someone out there to help us, we got to let that pride down and say that we do need help, brother.
And something, can
Hannah,
I
you
add?
talked- Go
Can I
ahead,
add
Chris.
quick?
Yeah.
Marvin, you're on a good point there. And something that I know that you do, and I know that Nicole have done, when we talk about the animals and animal therapy, and, we look at how we work with the animals, how has that helped both of you all working with the live animals? And then also we flip that around and look at the sacrifice that the animal makes for us, for substance. In our tribal friends that are joining us on the call today too, they believe also, when these animals are making sacrifice, but how does that tie when we're looking at working with animals as a therapy?
I'd like to tackle that one first if I can. Chris, that is the base of the Briarwood family, what you're talking about right now. Being out with the animals allows me to be me. They don't judge me for what I've been through. I tell them everything. They're great listeners. They are, but they don't judge me for what I've been through. And that is my first way of getting it out. But being out there with the herd, being out there with the cattle is more than being out with them. They allow me to be part of them. And by doing that, that gives me a sense of a place where I need to be at now. And in doing that, I build a relationship with my animals. I build that bond up with my animals that's just unbreakable. And it's definitely something that's hard to explain unless you're physically doing it, or I could show someone how to do it, because the animals it's like they're so soothing in that space. And they're, you can have a 1,200-pound bull, man, that's just gentle and just right there listening to him. You see his ears flapping left and right, but he's right there listening to you. And then at the end, when it comes down to the sacrificing side, Chris and Dave, I'm notorious for walking that processing plant prior to them, because I want to make sure that it's a comfortable and safe environment instead of someone just doing the wrong thing or having a bad day and it's taking out on that animal that's given so much. So I'm very thankful for that and the opportunity, because I get a chance to leave from out of my pasture and I get a chance to talk to my wife and my kids at that time. I'm very thankful for the opportunity to be with animals.
Nicole? Yeah.
I think that, first off, I think that was beautiful. I think that was like the best way you could say it. I think having my past in the equine assisted therapies has been helpful on one hand, but on the other hand too is that I bring Reiki and shamanic work into the work that we do that had never been done in the facilities that we had taken over before. So it's kind of something new and something that I can practice and that I can bring into our facilities. And it's something I can quietly do on our own. And that's something that I have done once I took over both facilities, is just to bring a new energy and a new spiritual energy. And I can talk to people that are open to it. Not everyone is open to shamanism, and not everyone is open to Reiki and that kind of practice, but it is something that I do and that I feel very compelled to do, especially with our animals. And it's very similar to Marvin, kind of knowing that your animals are, they're in a good space and they're well taken care of. And our situation is very different because it's not our animals. We're caring for someone else's animals as they enter our facility. So I need to make sure that they're well taken care of and just as loved as they were when they were dropped off.
That's right.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And by the way, folks, we'll have the contact information for Nicole and Hannah and Marvin here at the end. But Marvin, you were talking just about the fact of making that recognition and being open about it. And Hannah, we talked the other day when we were planning this about the word suicide. And, people being afraid to mention that. Let us talk about that a little bit.
Absolutely. That is the hardest thing to talk about, because at that point, Dave is where the individual Marvin felt like there's no more resources or available, or that there was no help for my business or my business plan. Coming out of the military, Dave, it's we're so used to structure in that place. We're so used to things, being at a particular location and all the information being there. But getting out of the military and starting all over again at a particular age, and you're competing against the civilian sector. My language is not the same because I'm coming from the military and I'm trying to learn a new language of agriculture, and that alone becomes a struggle, and you feel like you're failing, Dave. And that is not the case. It's just, we just had to relearn the system there. The second biggest problem out of that was trying to find the resources there of where someone that can help us to get started at in that era of trust, because veterans and farmers have a huge trust issue starting out. And that word failure, trust, suicide all rings together. And if you're not careful, one could be heavier than the other one, Dave.
Very good. And Hannah, yeah, talk about, that conversation as
Yeah.
well.
So I always go back to that there used to be this significant myth that if you ask someone if they're having thoughts about suicide, that you somehow are planting the thought in their head and that you're increasing the risk. And I always stress that one of the biggest risk factors for suicide, particularly in males, is the isolation that ends up occurring. And so research study after research study has found that by asking someone if they're having thoughts about suicide in an open, caring, non-judgmental manner, you immediately reduce the risk that they are not going to die of suicide because you have opened it up that you are a safe person for them to ask, for them to come to and to talk about what is they're struggling with. And so you start to chip away. So even if that in that moment they're like, nah, I'm good, they know that you're a safe person. They know that you're someone that you can go and talk to and start them on that journey. And, Marvin's talking, I worked a joke when you're a contracted social worker with the military, like you get a whole different education also. But, really making sure that you decrease that isolation and you just make it an acceptable conversation and you validate that everyone's journey to mental health and wellness is gonna look different. And so, even talking to Marvin and Nikki and their experiences, within within the profession. And so it's just, again, really validating it and giving them those options and giving them the ability and safety to talk to someone.
Yeah, and I would add too, and we have to be ready and be prepared, but more than likely somebody listening to this call or somebody that listens to the recording of this call is either in a bad place or knows somebody in a bad place, even if they don't know that they know somebody in a bad place. There are a lot of folks in a bad place for a lot of different reasons. So we always need to be aware of that and be compassionate to that. And we all know that speaking and talking about problems are not always easy. In our discussion back in December, we had some raw conversations about being able to be vulnerable and be open and communicate. And Marvin, can you touch on some of the things that allow you to be vulnerable and allow you to be open and communicate with folks about life? Life happens, right? And
It
it
does.
happens for everyone in different ways.
It does. My dad has a quote. Chris, my dad said, son, I need for you to understand something that don't miss the struggle for someone's smile. That alone is someone is struggling, but they can mask it behind a smile, Chris. But we have to be consistent with that person to say that, hey, I'm right here. I like to be open and say, Chris, I call you on a regular, and you're always there for me just the same. And I'm very thankful for that. And just for other people that are going through things, there's always someone in your corner that are willing to listen, who sincerely care about what you're going through and what you're doing. And believe it or not, going through this struggle of being in the meat industry or in the cattle industry, there's someone that has resources that they're not using anymore that will help out with the funding. Like say if it was cattle corrals, a corral system, there's someone with the old corral system that's out there in the field that they're not using anymore. Would be a great resource for someone else to start off with. And that alone would definitely catapult someone to know that they can do it. We just got to link up with each other and just say that I need help in that space and things will come for you.
Camaraderie.
Camaraderie. And Nicole, you were talking the other day about, even telling your personal story, how people that have had and gone through a journey of trying to figure out how to tell their story.
Right.
A little bit.
Well, I want to, if you don't mind, I'd like to I would like to share a little bit about slicing through the stigma, and then I can share that piece too, because, you know, slicing through the stigma came about because we had 3 suicides in a very short period of time in our ag community right here in Maine. And they were 3 males in our industry, and they were all from like 20 to 65. And they all had various different, you know, issues going on. And like we were talking, you know, one person you would have never known, you know, the other person had a background, and then the other person was older. And it really hit me very hard. And I just felt very compelled that we needed to get awareness out there for people. You know, and when you talk about rural areas, and you talk about farmers and where we're at, or meat processors, it's where, you know, slicing through the stigma came through, was like, hey, I need to get this out there. I need to know that people can contact someone, people can reach out. There is awareness, and we need to have a voice. And that's kind of where slicing through the stigma came in. That's where Hannah helped me form it, started raising money, awareness, and that's where kind of the voice came about, was just after that. You know, we have had 2 more suicides. One was in the farming community, and another was a male, just, you know, kind of staggered over the last couple of years. But again, the families know where to reach out to now. And it definitely is there. We also talked about that, Marvin was talking about having someone that you can talk to. You know, we shared that story a couple days ago about the man that came in that had gone through a traumatic event, and it affected him horribly, and he didn't know how to handle it, and he was really struggling with it. And I had told him to go to the Man Therapy group. And a year later, he came back and said that Man Therapy group had saved his life. It's having those resources, and just those, I mean, again, it was just going to a website, clicking a button, and he had that there for him. And again, it's someone feeling comfortable that you can speak to and reach out to. And I think Marvin hit it on the nail. It's just knowing that you can talk to somebody and someone's there for you, whether it's sharing cow panels, or, you know, a conversation, a cup of coffee, a tea. I think it's important that this community knows that we're all here, whether we're across state lines, or, you know, next door neighbors. I think we're all here for each other. And then you talked about telling stories. Telling your story, I think, is very challenging. You know, I have a traumatic event that happened when I was 16 years old, working on a farm. And I had someone that was murdered that was very close to us. And I haven't known how to tell my story. And I'm 50. So carrying that burden for all these years has been very hard for me. And so what I'm going to be doing is, through Hannah and through NAMI National, and then there's NAMI Maine, I'm going to be taking a 2-part story, or a 2-part class, to tell my story. But the way that I'm going to be taking the class is through an advocacy, so that I can help other victims that have gone through the same thing I have gone through. And that I'll be able to do it in a way that it will teach me how to communicate effectively. And it gives me skill building. I'm not very good at communicating sometimes. I'm pretty mouthy. I have a sailor mouth. And when I get excited, I can really be very animated. But I want to be able to stand in front of legislators and representatives and tell my story in an effective way. And NAMI Maine has those kind of skill building classes. So I will be doing that, Dave. That goes back to your question on how to tell your story. NAMI also has other ways to do that too. There's other places on their website and other classes that they offer.
Great. And I want Hannah to talk about NAMI, but also, again, folks, if you have any, not just questions, but if you have any comments that you want to put into the Q&A and add to the conversation, please do. And Nicole Maston, who's the wizard behind the screen at these things, she'll put up in the chat a lot of these resources that Nicole and Hannah and Marvin are talking about, so that you can link on those right now. But Hannah, explain to folks a little bit about NAMI and the work that it does.
We are a national organization. Here in Maine, we just celebrated our 40th year as the state chapter. But NAMI's actually been around for I always hate to do the math going back to like the 80s and the 70s. It seemed like it wasn't that long ago, but it was. So we've been around for about 50-ish years. Again, it's a national organization. And so we have the umbrella national organization, and then every state has a state chapter that has affiliates. We have family support groups, we have peer support groups, we have Homefront, which is a support group for service connected, either prior service, military connected, veteran status. We like to encompass all of it because we know that there's a lot of folks out there that are consider themselves prior service as opposed to for veteran status. And we have programs for first responders. There's just a lot. Every state chapter offers programs that are a little bit different and unique to them. But then also we have what we call NAMI signature programs. And again, those are the support groups, family trainings on how to tell your story and share your story. We do a lot to promote really just normalizing conversations about mental health. Everyone has physical health, everyone has mental health and wellness. And so how do we promote that? We know that they're connected and they're tied in together. So really advocating for positive system change, awareness, slicing through the stigma as Nikki does her campaign, and just really, again, normalizing this conversation, getting support, education, and then that advocacy and awareness out there into the communities for resources.
Great. So, yeah, people can reach out to NAMI wherever they're at. I notice on your website, people can go on and, find your local area, and that's a great resource. In regard to some local events, Marvin, you and Tanisha are getting ready to do the 4th annual Day of Healing. There is
Yes.
something, explain a little bit about how you came to that and what Day of Healing is all about.
Absolutely. How I came about it, I actually went to the doctor's office one day, and I got startled in my doctor's office. He walked in the room very fast, and small room, and it startled me, Dave. I came home and I just could not let that go, of how, that started me so bad. And I came home and talked to my wife about it. And I'm like, honey, I wish there was a way that we could just do it here. And she put it together here that we can have an event here on the farm called a Day of Healing, from where we could bring all the subject matter experts and bring those great resources here to our farm in an open environment, from where everyone can get their distance from what they want for being social or antisocial, but yet still feel as if they're part of what's going on. I think that's one of the most important parts that we have here for the Day of Healing, and bringing resources that are consistent at what they're doing, from financial to how to build or whatever it may be, a variety of things that can touch someone's space from where they need help at that one particular time. And the last thing is being a great listener. Dave, I like to open myself up to be an example from the male's point of view, to let people know that it's okay to say that we're hurting in there. I see myself like a lion with a thorn in my paw, but I need some help for someone to help me get this thorn out of my paw here. And it's just definitely something that it's okay, but someone needs to be an example. And I take the way with that, and I let my situation be an example to save someone else. And I just really hope that every time that we get a chance to do it, we meet someone and save someone else. I feel very happy with that, because I know what it's like being in that position. And I don't want anyone else to be in that position. No one.
Marvin, one thing I'd like to maybe tag onto that is, when you talk about telling your story or giving a testimony about the things you've been through, or opening up and communicating,
Mhm.
just once you're able to communicate and talk about the situations you've been through, can you talk about how maybe that lifted that burden off of you? Got the weight off your chest, off your shoulders. Can you maybe explain that a little bit, and maybe how you were able to come to that point and be able to talk?
Yes, Chris, that's an excellent point. Starting out, your words come out harsh. It comes out very hard for someone to hear the situation, and it's not going to come out pleasing to the other person. Someone would easily think that you're mad at them or upset with them, but truly that's, I'm just saying myself, my way of trying to lift this load up off of me. It's not something to mean anything is being directed to that person, but it's just a way that it comes off because the feelings are so all over the place, you know, and it's trying to hard to try to arrange it to come out properly. And next thing you know, your face is balled up like this. And it's not that I'm mad, it's just someone's just confused about what's going on at the time. And you just need someone to listen to you. And then when you start talking about it, you're talking about things everywhere. And that's a great start from right there, just getting it off your chest. I walk around with the notebook in my hand every day. That way I can write things down so I don't forget it. And that way I can memorize or put it back out again. So that way I get a chance to say it again so it comes off a little bit easier versus blah and just thrown in someone's lap, you know. But it's a challenge to start it. But once you start it, that person that's on the receiving end, they truly understand and they're ready to listen to you. And I'm ready to listen to anyone too that needs that help and to help them to get started as well.
Nicole, you have the program, yeah, Southpaw Health and Wellness.
Yes.
Yeah, fill us in a little bit. Yeah.
Well, the Southpaw Health and Wellness is developing, it's growing. We are bringing in it's kind of like Marvin's Day of Wellness. We have NAMI that helps us with that. And I actually have brought in a couple other key players that we're bringing in. I'm not sure what the equivalent of MEMIC is across other states, but it's our workers' comp facility, and they offer trainings. I'm working with physical therapists to help us with muscular skeletal issues in our and repetitive motion. So it's a combination of anything that you can think of that we're trying to incorporate in our wellness program. And it's something that I just took on more seriously in 2025. So we are growing that. And we're really cultivating wellness is kind of what we're calling it now. And I think that's the journey that we're on, is really how do we look at wellness as a whole? And how can we tackle it? And especially in our industry, and I am going to throw this out there, I work with a bunch of men that are old school that I have to pretty much shake them to ask them, hey, what's going on with you? What do you need from me? You know, they don't talk and they don't speak up. And it goes into crisis mode before I know that something's wrong with them. And so we're trying to nip that in the bud this year as well, is how can we get that out, and how can we get some of the folks that are all bottled up and don't want to speak, how can I get them to open up a little bit more?
You know,
The other thing,
Nicole,
Dave, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, we keep talking about men, but I also want to put this out there that there's a lot of women that work in this industry, and there's a lot of women farmers. One of the other initiatives that I'm working on is that we don't talk about health in women. And women do not speak up. You know, we always hear, oh, it's just your period, or it's just your monthly, you're just being a bitch. And I really want to put it out there that that's not so. And I think it's something that if we could be a little bit, I don't want people to be sensitive to that, but I do want people to understand that there is that in mental health and well-being with women, that we do need to look at women's health a little bit more closely, and also men's health. I'm not afraid to talk about, ED with men. And if they're struggling with that, I'm not afraid to talk about hormonal therapy or any of that stuff. And that stuff we don't talk about for mental health, but it is a huge thing. And again, men have no problem talking to me, and women have no problem talking to me about it. I'm not a professional, and we need to put that out there. Just people are very comfortable sitting down in a chair and having a cup of coffee and laying it out with me. So those are just things I do want to put on the table for people to be, listening and hearing from others, that there is a whole thing of wellness that needs to be tackled, that I think we need to be more open of hearing. And sorry, Marvin, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up a point you just brought up there. There are certain signs that it show as well. that someone is doing the different habits out of their norm. And you could obviously tell that they're spiraling. If it's drinking or if it's, speed driving or whatever it may be, something of a sort that's out of that person's normal. That is definitely a time that we're seeing these issues, but we need to let that person know that we're there for them. The signs are there, directly in front of us. It just takes that one person to say, hey, Marvin, I'm right here for you, and hey, hey, let's talk about it. Let's go get some lunch. There's general ways that we could start the conversation by getting someone out of their environment so that they know that this is a trusted person that they could talk to. And then once you do that, be consistent with that person. And that way they can see that someone does truly care for them, love them, and appreciate them in every which way, because everyone needs to be loved, appreciated, and valued.
And
Marvin,
oh.
whoop, sorry, good. I was just gonna say, I'm so glad Marvin said that because I texted one of my employees today at lunch, asked him how he was, asked him how he was doing, and then he wrote back that he needed a hug. And he is somebody that generally wouldn't ask for anything like that. And I think that is key to those kind of conversations and knowing the people that you're around. Sorry,
And
Hannah.
No, that's fine. I was gonna add on to that and say that one of the things that can be really difficult too is when you have certain personality types, both male and female. Oftentimes when they start struggling with their mental health, it's a lot of things that end up pushing others away, particularly in a work setting. But it's usually, I always lead with my jerk. It's one of two things. Either everyone thinks you're a jerk or you think everyone else is a jerk. But if you meet one in a day, probably there's something there. If you meet 10 in a day, there's a common denominator. I never point at the exact person I'm referring to, but it's a way to self-reflect, but it also makes it really that much more difficult. And I always validate for folks. It makes it that much more difficult to really want to reach out in certain settings because you're like, well, they're irritable and they're getting frustrated and they're impatient and they're not doing what's being asked of them and they look like they're being lazy. And it's all of those sorts of symptoms that start to come out that usually are indicative that they're struggling with their mental health pretty significantly. But those are the times I always say, those are the times where we all want to step back because we're like, you're not pleasant to be around. But making sure that you find someone who can actually step forward and be able to support them. And I love that Nikki talks about ED. I am known as the I'll say nicely, the bowel movement lady here in the state of Maine, because I always say your bathroom habits are one of the best indicators of what's going on with your mental health. And so Nikki and I have formed quite the reputations for ourselves.
Yeah,
Reputation
that's
to
good.
have. So,
That's good.
when you talk about the difference of men and women through my career, one of the things I noticed, particularly with farm or ranch families, if they're under stress, financial stress, a lot of times the husband thinks if he can go out and get on the tractor and drive around the field, everything will be okay. But the wife is in the kitchen table going through the books, trying to figure out how to make that next mortgage payment. And so, yeah, it is, different things there. Chris, you've worked, you've been inside of a meat processing plant. You've got some perspective on this. I think is really helpful as well.
Yeah, I was just going to add on to Nicole too, somebody reaching out saying they need a hug, that's real. And for the men that are on listening to us today too, it's okay to hug your brother. It's okay to hug your men that you work with, you're close with. It's okay to tell another man you love him. We're all brothers and sisters in this, and we've got to find ways to break these chains and not be bound all the time. You got to get that weight lifted off of you. There's lots of things that we all need to do. So be aware of that. And I was in a plant for several years. Several years ago, we had a veteran that had served quite a bit of time overseas, and he wanted to work on the harvest floor. We're like, well, we thought, well, it's good. We thought it was very ambitious of him for a little while. And after a while, in the mornings, you could just see this glazed look on his eyes. He was really looking forward way too much of going into that harvest room and harvesting animals. So, you have to be aware too, sometimes people are in bad places. They're not talking about it. They're not gonna express it. But we need to, again, look for signs of folks that might need to change their environment. We started rotating this individual to different rooms, different departments. We even rotated this individual out to work with the live animals. Let's go out and let's think about this as some animal therapy. Let's change the environment where we're not taking animals' lives every day. Let's go back and love them. Let's go back and love on them a little more, and maybe share a little love. And that really changed the perspective on this individual who had spent a lot of time in war, and then came back and went into the meat processing environment. So you can see a lot of different things if you're looking and if you're paying attention. We all need to be present. We all need to care. We need to show love. And if you do have somebody that is trying to talk to you, and it's hard. It can be very hard when we're busy, we're in a hustle and bustle of running a business every day, that if somebody's coming to you and trying to talk, a lot of times those individuals will make more than one attempt. That they might see you're busy the first time or two, but they're going to keep coming back. And we have, as listeners, we need to recognize when somebody is truly trying to open up and tell us something. So, we don't want to be super careful not to shut somebody out where you might be the only resource they have, or you
That's
might
right.
be the only one they trust to come and open up to and talk to. So you may not think you're that person, but you might be. You might be
That's
the
right.
person that individual needs at that moment or that week or that month. You might be the only one they're going to talk to. So be aware of that. If somebody is repeatedly coming to you and wanting to talk and wanting to open up, wanting to share their story or testimony or whatever it might be, try to take the time and listen.
That's
And
right.
it literally means you sitting down, turning your phone off, not checking your email for a short amount of time. Maybe it's 30 minutes, maybe it's an hour, maybe it's 4 hours, who knows? But whatever it takes to let that person, flow and let them get that off their chest, it's going to take that. And everyone has that eventually, I believe. You just may not realize when it's going to happen or where it's going to be. So there's a lot of takeaways here in this call, in this roundtable discussion, but know that there are resources out there. And I was going to let even Nicole, I know you've ran across resources in the past other than NAMI. If there's other resources that you all know of, we work with Farmer Veteran Coalition. They have a hotline. We work with Farm Aid. They have a hotline. There's the suicide hotline. We're going to put some of these resources up at the end of the call, but don't be afraid to call. Don't be afraid to reach out. And again, if you think there's somebody that needs help, try to help them get help. You might be the only hand that's reaching out to them before they make some bad decisions. So just be
Exactly.
aware of that.
And Chris, can I add
Absolutely.
just, oh,
Go
I was
ahead,
gonna say,
Hannah.
one thing that you said that really struck with me is something, because again, I work across a lot of different populations, but very similar personality types with, again, first responders, veterans, agricultural, fishing, all of that sort of stuff. Really high risk, when you think about it, and exposure to things that I always say, if people have normal reactions to really abnormal situations. There's a lot of situations that the industry is put in that the general public doesn't fully understand. I mean, when you guys are talking about the care and the compassion for the animals and, and all of that. And there's also a big risk, or there can be a risk for accidents too, right? And if there's an accident that happens, it knocks you out of work. Normalizing that reactions to those stressors is completely normal. I spend a lot of time, people start getting into comparisons after different situations and stressors, and I'm like, your brain and body does not know what someone else's brain and body has been through. And again, there are normal, typical reactions and responses to stressful situations, and starting to normalize that it's okay to have a reaction to that is really, really important. And that's how we start, again, making those inroads and slowly chipping away at the walls that people have put up.
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, one of the things that struck me, Nicole and Marvin, is your various programs, Day of Healing and Southpaw Health and Wellness, you know, kind of grow out of your own experiences. Um, and I'm just thinking about folks that, you know, on the roundtable around the country, um, that, you know, the need for folks like yourselves that aren't maybe trained professionals or anything like that, just to say, what can I do to reach out to my neighbors and put together some events? And um, I'm just I'm volunteering both of you that if anybody
Yeah.
wants to look at what can I do in my community, you know, all three of you, yeah, you know, what can I do in my community, if they could reach out to you and just brainstorm a little bit with that, because I think there's so much need for that type of grassroots thing, peer-to-peer thing out there that would be so helpful.
Dave, that's excellent. I would love to give my lessons learned in this space because it's extremely a lot. And then all four of our lessons learned could definitely help out someone start their process for the community. I would love to be part of this, if you don't mind, to give anyone my
Absolutely.
lessons learned.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
I
you
was
know,
curious
we'll have
too.
that. Yep.
Real quick, Dave, we have some listeners on that are, Montana, Wyoming, y'all are in Maine, the cold weather. Do you all see, a rise in, in mental health needs during these cold times and winter times? And maybe it's called the winter blues. I'm not sure, but,
So
do
there's
y'all
a
see
lot,
increase?
there's a lot of conversation and a lot of myths about certain things that when we actually pull back and we look at the numbers, we know that more people struggle with their mental health and reach out for services or reach out for peer support or anything like that throughout the winter months. However, we know that the highest risk time where we lose the most people to suicide is actually spring and early summer. Because folks, we all up here at least, North Carolina, you guys have much nicer weather there, geez. But I mean, we anticipate it, and everyone kind of muddles through the winter months, and we all reach out and check on each other because it's a difficult time. And, people talk about, cabin fever and the winter blues. And everyone kind of says, I just have to make it to spring. That's a mantra that we repeat frequently here. May will come and hopefully it won't snow. But what we know is that as we all are kind of unified and trying to get through, where people are more likely to reach out to help and are for help and more likely to reach out to each other. Once spring hits, everyone anticipates feeling better. And the majority of people do start to feel better. And so for those who are truly struggling, when that weather hits and everyone's like, oh, you should be fine now. We're busy. We have this going on. We can be outside. One, peer support pulls back. But two, all of a sudden it's something's really wrong with me. This isn't normal anymore.
Mm,
And again, that's when we see the risk factors or the risk for suicide deaths to go up.
that's a good point.
Yeah, excellent point. And I think as we start to wrap up here, I'm just going to ask each of you, your thoughts of what would be the first step in reaching out to someone that you feel is struggling with mental health challenges. How do you start that conversation? And while we do that, I'm going to ask Nicole Mass to put up your contact information and the resources links that we have, and then again we'll have that in our website. So Hannah, I'm going to start with you. Yep.
I think that that's a loaded question because it depends on what my role in my relationship is with the person, to be completely transparent, because I'm going to speak their language. I always say it's really hard for people to get upset if you're like, I am really worried about you. I care about you. I'm really worried about you, and I want to provide support. But there are also situations and circumstances where I've reached out to people in different populations. This is one of them with personality types, where I'd be like, hey, so your wife called and said you're being a huge, I won't use the language that they use, but your wife's saying this about you. What is going on? She's worried about you, doesn't think she can have the conversation. And so she called me. Like, what's going on? Let's talk about it. And so I might have that kind of conversation. But again, I always ground it in a place of, we all care about you and we notice something's not quite right.
That's right.
Marvin?
Yes, yes.
And Nicole, switch up to the first page with the resource links there. Yep. Go ahead, Marvin.
Um, my open way of doing this through food. I get two things out of food. Sharing a meal with someone does two things. For someone that's struggling with mental health, the position of the presenter or of the listener is very important. That way, you're not standing directly in front of that person. You're in their space. Stand off a little bit from them and off to the side a little. Imagine my nose to your shoulder, Dave. In an arm and a half length distance away. And that gives that person proper space so that they could literally scan their left and right sectors looking around. And to involve that is the exact same way of doing it over a meal. I like to go out to eat and offer, a nice meal of choice. I love barbecue. It's full of flavor in that space, and it opens up a great conversation, and it clears your mind in that space, and where we could talk in a trusted environment. And I think food, is a major role in mental health. From where people can come back together the same way grandmothers used to have it at the table and everyone talked at the table as a family. We need to bring that back as a community. Yes, use that word again, community policing, and we'll police each other up here and talk about our issues and concerns. It's very important. Everyone needs to be listened to. But I think food and a nice steak or a nice roast with grandma's potatoes and carrots in it would definitely have someone to open up there.
I'll be down for dinner. Yep. So, all right. Go ahead, Nicole. You're in the tough spot. You get to clean up here. Yeah.
Well, I think I'm a combination of Hannah and Marvin because we open our home every Sunday to anyone that wants to come eat. It's open. Our family, all of our girls come home for dinner and we open it
Mhm.
up. My husband cooks for a group of veterans that they sit around a shed every Sunday and they watch football or whatever's on TV. And my husband does a barbecue and takes the
Yeah.
food up to them and sits with them every Sunday. And then he comes home to us. And that's what it is. It's just, sitting around a meal, talking, open up our home to just sit and chat and what's going on. And again, our door is open to anyone that wants to come and eat at our home. And then at like Hannah, it depends on if I have to reach out to you, it depends on who you are and how I'm going to speak to you. And that's kind of just open there. And I think for the most part, I have a lot of people that just kind of call me or text me or email me. So, I think it depends on the circumstance.
That's right.
Well, thank you. And just a reminder, yeah, the day of healing is May 17th, right, Marvin?
Absolutely. And everyone is invited. We start that morning day with yoga for everyone to, get back into exercise again. And we like yoga because it's limited to people's injuries and so forth. And it's a gentle way of doing it. We slide into breakfast from Panera Bread, give a few classes on ag and resources and agribusiness. We do some lunch there with Mission Barbecue, and we do some whole hog barbecue. And after that, this year, we're gonna end it by taking the selected people that register on our Eventbrite, take them into the butcher shop to show them where their food is coming from, to show them how to, make some ground beef or smoke some bacon or make some sausage or something like that. And they're gonna leave with the package in their hand. We're very excited about it.
It's great. All right, Chris, we've covered a lot, so you get the last word here, buddy.
We've sure talked a lot about food, and I've got a pot roast ready to put on the crock pot now, and I've got a pork belly seasoning in the fridge, Marvin. So I'll be making some bacon too. But I'll be uh, I'll be happy to be with you out May 17th out in Red Springs, North Carolina. So I'll look forward to seeing you. And thanks everyone for the discussion. We must have covered a lot of topics very well. We didn't have any questions today, but just know we're all available. If you all do have any questions, please send us an email, call us. We're happy to help any way we can.
Yep. Call, you got the contact information for Hannah and Nicole and Marvin. They all said, yep, they'd, be willing to, they're eager to answer the phone and visit with you. And again, this will be on our website. And just to let you know, on February 25th, we are going to be doing a roundtable on remote meat grading. So we're going to have Emily Vareja from AMS, who's one of the team leaders with the remote grading program, as well as someone from Utah. What is it? Utah Rancher. It's a packing company in Utah that utilizes remote grading. This is a great asset for small processors, so be sure and be looking for that. And then in March, we're putting together a roundtable on pet products for small processors. I talked to Stephanie Vola from Earth Animal, one of the brands that's out there that is working with smaller processors. We will have a regulator on to talk about that as well. And again, when you get the survey, feed us your suggestions for future roundtables, because as Chris said at the beginning, we go through that. We want to make sure we're getting the information out that everybody needs. So with that, we really appreciate Hannah and Nicole and Marvin being with us today. And we hope everybody has the great rest of your day and stay warm. Take care.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Yeah.